It's quite cold today. It's spring in Tasmania, but it usually is pretty cold still at this time. And I was watching a Instagram video by Mark Webber, who is he's married to an actor. He is also an actor. He's married to an actor, Teresa Palmer from Discovery of Witches, and he's an actor as well. And normally I don't take much notice of celebrities. But I was watching, I like Mark Webber because they're all vegan. They seem to have a sort of a very down-to-earth view of life. And his mother, of course, is amazing, Sherry Honkler, who is from the Poor People's Army, and she does a lot of excellent work with the unhoused, with homeless people in Philadelphia. And she's not pandering to the nonsense of the duopoly. She's not like some organizations in the non-for-profit industrial complex, where they pander to, the Democratic Party and all that kind of thing, and they'll never criticize the Democratic Party or, where Sherry Honkler does amazing work. Anyway, her son is, in this regard, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. He seems to have an understanding of this issue himself. Not that he's giving much away when he speaks on Instagram about it, but he's talking about how, he sort of feels like, things are very concerning. How, with the talk of nuclear weapons being used, tactical in quotes, nuclear weapons. He's not saying this, but he's not being as explicit as this, but I imagine this is what's behind it. He saw things about Armageddon on Twitter and stuff, and he said, this is not really what I envisioned for myself or my children. 5 of them, he has 5 children, and he said, I didn't envisage we would all go up in, be vaporized, basically, when I started out in life. And he said, and this whole idea that there's all this... all these people who have opinions about other people's opinions and so forth on social media, and all these sort of toxicity and the hate. He says in real life, it doesn't really feel like that. People that he runs into, they don't have animosity towards, sort of people from other countries and so forth. And he says, my reality doesn't match with what is on social media. And I've said this before, and I'm going to show that little clip too, because I think it's a good little clip from him. And I've said this before, that my reality also does not match up with what's going on social media. And I've mentioned that I've been basically pushed out of the town square due to algorithm censorship, etc. But I still engage in it because that is the town square. But my reality in real life and the people that I meet, there isn't that hostility, that needing to argue with everything and so forth. Also, there is ignorance in relation to what the U.S. empire is doing and why we've reached this point. There's also no particular analysis of the system that we're in, being capitalism, and how that's hand in hand with imperialism, and that's why we are at this point, basically. There isn't, sadly, but there is basically none of this sort of awfulness that you see on social media. And that is sometimes, I feel, well, not sometimes, but it becomes very clear to me that that social media has become like a psyops, a government psyops, basically, which is, and it's also a capitalist thing where, the social media giants are trying to get people engaged in arguments to create more viewership, and that in turn brings them in more money from advertising. So they encourage and try and experiment on people, and they have done experiments with people on social media to try and cause more engagement for advertising dollars. And the government, and also they're in cahoots with the likes of the Atlantic Council, which is a neocon think tank, which pushes for war. And so social media has a lot of that kind of think tank and that kind of those kinds of individuals and organizations involved in social media and controlling the narrative on social media with trending topics, etc., to create, to manufacture consent for war and to manufacture consent for the possibility of a nuclear war and putting out the idea that it will be possible to win, in quotes, a nuclear war with Russia or China, and which is an insanity. There is no winning, and it's not going to happen like that. But that is the narrative that has been put out by the U.S. national security state via these social media giants, and unfortunately, it would appear on social media that this is something that is being accepted by the public, that it is okay, that it would be a good idea to have this tactical nuclear strike on a major nuclear power, that being Russia, and in the future it probably would be China. Now, there's been revealed that there are, for example, in relation to the Ukraine war, the University of Adelaide did a study and discovered that 90% of all the comments that are pro-Ukraine war are actually bots on Twitter. And I would say that this is the case for any other saber-rattling by empire towards a country, that you will have the deployment of these bots, and that's how you give the illusion of there being a consent for a war, or a future war, like is what is being done to Iran via the instance of the death of Mahsa Amini. And just for a moment, I'll digress for a moment and just say that last night I saw a video of Mahsa Amini, who was speaking with someone. This is just before she collapsed. Speaking with someone, she was talking to them. They touched her on the shoulder and walked away, and then she collapsed on a chair and fell to the ground. And there's talk that she actually died of cerebral hypoxia and had a major organ shutdown. But there was no striking involved or torture, etc., of her. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know where this video came from. I'll have to look into it, but maybe something will come up way down the track when it's no longer a talking point. But the effect is successful in that you have all these clueless celebrities talking about Mahsa Amini and how awful Iran is and all of that kind of thing, and that we need to do something about Iran. So mission accomplished with that PSYOP, using that particular woman, that sad event of that Iranian woman's death, to create fertile ground for the future invasion of Iran, which is something that the US has been wanting to do now since the failed coup back decades ago in Iran, and they've never forgiven Iran since for that. So the U.S. national security state keeps the pot boiling for a future war with Iran via PSYOPs, what I feel is a PSYOP, like Mahsa Amini. I mean, there are so many people talking about it at the moment. It's so widespread, and basically almost every celebrity you can think of has been talking about it, and then all their followers. And often celebrities are just useful idiots for the Democratic Party and for the U.S. national security state. You would swear that there's nothing going on outside this particular person's death, that there is no war other than the Ukraine war with Russia. In an instance where Russia did invade Ukraine due to, in part, an existential threat by NATO, and the U.S. government has been sort of making out as if there's nothing else has been going on in the world. It is awful. No other wars, etc., except for this one. And everybody, sadly, because they're so propagandized, just jump on board with that narrative and think that everything was okay until Russia just, with insane Putin, just invaded a country. And by the way, I'm getting off the topic about Mark Webber, but I'm going to get back to that. And by the way, somebody like Kyle Kulinski, who does journalism with Crystal Ball, he's very clueless, I feel, on the whole Russia and the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, and sadly makes commentary on it and actually sort of says things that are U.S. national security state talking points, and one of them being that Putin is insane. This is so typical of U.S. national security state to paint everybody that is doing something against empire or interfering with empire's plans or just being doing stuff for the people or whatever. The very usual response from the U.S. national security state and people who promote those narratives is to say that any of those leaders are insane, or they're just totally insane, blowing up their own pipelines, that kind of thing that supposedly Russia is now supposed to have done, that kind of thing. So, it's really unfortunate, people like Kyle Kulinski are putting out that sort of stuff. We've got enough of that with the mainstream media, the corporate media. We don't need people who are supposedly saying they're on the left putting out that kind of thing. I mean, he's really more of a liberal than anything. Anyway, I digress, but so what I'm saying is the Mahsa Amini situation is being used just to drum up more war with Iran in the future. And I wish that if people weren't so propagandized, they would be able to see that. If they had any sort of media analysis, they would be able to see that. That's why it's very important that we be able to analyze the media and have some idea about government, have some idea about capitalism and what it does, to be able to see through these kinds of events. So back to Mark Webber. He's even though he may be a celebrity of sorts and an actor, he is a person just like everybody else, and he sees, even though he probably doesn't follow as close as maybe you and I do, the various shenanigans of empire, just one thing after another, one war after another, multiple propaganda narratives going on at the same time to interfere with targets of empire, whether they be Venezuela or Bolivia or Russia or China or Iran, DPRK and so forth. He probably doesn't follow all of that. Most people don't follow it. Most people are being fed corporate media. So why would they sort of think anything else? That there's only just one war happening and it happens to be some rogue state like Russia and those awful ex-communists or whatever. Of course they don't have any morals. Their country used to be, communist. So these people, you can't trust them. All those sort of awful narratives have been sort of bubbling along for decades and decades and decades, because the religion of the US is an anti-communist one, basically, putting aside the Christian fascism that's become very prominent now. But anti-communism is that you cannot call Russia remotely communist now, and Putin is definitely not communist. He, in fact, hates communism, it seems. He's got a lot of gripes about it. So, but, all those narratives, the yellow peril in relation to China, these are all hateful, xenophobic narratives that are used they're kept on the boil. These particular positions are kept on the boil for decades and decades and decades, so that they can be, so the heat can be turned up and they can come to fruition eventually. They just keep it all going, keep vilifying these particular countries until they want to invade. And all of this, by the way, is under the umbrella of capitalism, because these are capitalist pursuits, as an author said recently, as an author said a couple of years ago. The CIA is the invisible army of capitalism. So everything that is happening right now, whether it be the demise of the ecosystem, the planet, through the climate crisis and imminent human extinction and imminent all other animals' extinction, most other animals' extinction is on the horizon, and all the wars that are currently, most of everything that is happening right now, all the different wars and the impending wars, are all the result of capitalism, which is hand in hand with imperialism. So that is why, if we really want peace in the world, we really have to be anti-imperialist, anti-war. If we really want to have if we really want to have peace in the world, we also need to be vegan, because you cannot have hundreds of billions of land animals and trillions of sentient aquatic animals being tortured and killed every year, and have peace on the planet. You cannot, if we're ingesting these animal products mostly, or wearing them or using them for entertainment and so forth, it's not possible. No matter if all the wars stop tomorrow, it's not possible to have peace on the planet while we're doing that every single day, 3 times a day and whatever. Not possible. So that is something else. If we, apart from capitalism, that is driven by us. It's not actually something that is the result of capitalism. We are the people who create demand for animal products. So these wars, and of course, we're participating in capitalism with our demand, and we're participating in animal exploitation and death and great violence, and in turn the climate crisis, because animal agriculture is a major driver of the climate crisis. We're participating in all of that with our demand for animal products. I've yet to see the left embrace that and really act on it, and I hope that happens before too long. So when I see the sadness in Mark Webber's face, I know that there would be a lot of people who would feel the same way, because most people in the world, from what reports, seem to not want any war with Russia, that is any escalated war. They actually want a peaceful resolution. There's only a few unhinged people, the likes of John Bolton, who is an unhinged warmonger, people like that, and people who are totally invested in having disparity of wealth in the world. They're also into ongoing war, because, as I mentioned, capitalism and imperialism go hand in hand. So they know that for capitalism to continue, it has to, the US empire has to go in and continue to invade countries and steal their resources and then take over. That is something that has to happen for capitalism to continue at this point in end-stage capitalism. And that is why eventually fascism is sweeping the world right now, and will be fully in overdrive in the United States in the coming years. And that's the only way it can go in end-stage capitalism. Capitalism in decay. Fascism is the outcome. So, but I wanted to just go back to the issue of reality and what is happening on social media. It's very hard sometimes if you spend a lot of time on social media. You start to lose track of the reality in real life away from online. You start to sort of lose touch with real people and how they are in life. And just living around here, most people just want a peaceful existence. They don't want strife. They certainly don't want. They certainly don't enjoy people being poor and or unhoused. That is the general thing with most people. Most people here, anyway, are fairly civilized about. They just want to have a peaceful life, and they want others to have a peaceful life too. They just want to live life, and really, if things hadn't gone the way they were, with the internet or with capitalism and all of that, we'd just be probably in small communities, growing food, enjoying one another, sort of making things, telling stories to each other, and so forth. It sounds very simple, but a lot of people used to live that way in small communities, and they didn't know what the rest of the world was doing. They were living their lives in small communities, and it was a simple life. And really, in many ways, that's what human beings are meant to be doing. We're not meant to know every awful thing that's happening in the world, children being killed and so forth. There are advantages to knowing what's going on in the world, of course, because it's good to know, if some empire is basically coming for you or whatever, or some pandemic is happening somewhere, or there's all sorts of there's a lot of advantages to knowing what's going on in the world, but there's also a lot of learned helplessness that happens knowing what's going on in the world. And there's also a lot of depression and also a lot of bad ideas come from other countries through these mediums of the internet to susceptible individuals who are easily swayed, and who have hateful positions which are just watered by these various narratives that come from different countries. And just speaking of hateful narratives, I was kind of surprised to see how many hate groups are in Australia at this point in time, and I'm going to do a little video just on and naming them and saying a little bit about them. It's very interesting to see how many neo-Nazi groups are in Australia at this point, something that I never thought would ever happen. We had problems here, and we had racism here, etc. But we, as far as I know, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, I was born in 1960, and I've not been aware that there's been Nazi groups in those early decades. And so that is very unfortunate, but there's a lot of things that are very unfortunate that are happening in Australia at this point. And it is no different in many ways from what's happening in other countries, like other Western countries, and how fascism is spreading around the world. And that's what happens when you have end-stage capitalism. And that is, there are those kinds of ideas, and there's also, fascist-leaning or authoritarian-leaning government, politicians that are in Australia now, which I never thought I would see, and which wouldn't have been tolerated about 30 years ago, I have to say. And when I was growing up in the 60s, I was in grade 5 in 1965, and I didn't know all that was going on in the world. I didn't know there was that horrific Vietnam War. I didn't know that there was the standoff in the Bay of Pigs, where there was, if it hadn't been for, I think, a Russian military person, that we may have all ended up in a mushroom cloud back then. I didn't know that. Back then, I was just going to school, mostly white school, and it was a Catholic school. I was just, playing with other children, skipping on a rope, having to sing God Save the Queen every morning on parade. And meanwhile, there's all this awful stuff going on in the name of, and my country was participating in it, the Vietnam War. And so many Vietnamese children and mothers, etc., died, were, sort of maimed and given awful genetic illnesses from, the Agent Orange, and not to mention all the non-human animals that were killed in the forest with the spraying of Agent Orange and napalm, etc. Horrific stuff. And that was all going on while I'm just playing in the schoolyard, having a nice time, completely oblivious to the horror that the West was visiting on these various countries that are still recovering. And it's sad to see Australia basically now having working poor people. Working poor. It's bad enough that we have unhoused people and poor people living below the poverty line, and now we have the working poor, just like in the United States. It's like a critical mass has happened now in Australia, and now all the awful things that the United States has happening is starting to really come together in Australia, where somebody who was making, some woman I watched on a Four Corners program — I don't like Four Corners because they just promote, this used to be a very, very good program once, now it just promotes US imperialist narratives, and that's what the media is like here now, the ABC and all of that. But I watched a program about, it's called No Place to Call Home, something like that. I'll put a link to it. And it's this one woman who has 2 children, and she's basically cannot afford to pay rent, because now rents have gone up double, basically, from $350 a week, $350 Australian dollars, to twice that in a week. And she's making a low income, or I think it's a low income, $750 Australian dollars a week, and she can't afford rent. And she's got these 2 children, so her boss said, you can stay for 3 months in this hotel where she's working, and she can try and find a place while she's working there. So she's got 2 children near whereby she's working, cleaning things, the pram and the 5-year-old sort of basically in the same area where she's working, or sometimes when she's working behind the bar. I mean, that is untenable, and it's unbelievable to watch somebody who's supposed to be working and trying to keep an eye on their children. This is something that is in recent years is totally new to Australia. People not being able to afford any place to live, even when they're working. It's appalling. And just by the way, I found out today that the Freedom of Information, organisation in Australia, is basically saying that that if you apply for freedom of information about the Scott Morrison government and what Scott Morrison was doing, which was he took over a number of portfolios in secret, apparently. It was so-called in secret, but I don't think that was the case. He had the complicity of a number of people. But he took over a number of portfolios. This is the Prime Minister of Australia, and he did it without the knowledge of the Australian public, and so that he could control, the health ministerial section, along with another minister that was the health minister. He basically was doing a little authoritarian move without the knowledge of the Australian public. And one of the ex-ministers asked for information from the Freedom of Information organisation, I don't know what you call it, and they refused to give him that information and said, because something to the effect of that the media might start talking about it. Well, yes. So, and the Albanese government, the Labor government, the government of the day, is fine with that, for that not to be released. So I don't know what's going on there, but that is a very, very strange event that's happening right now in Australia, and that's something that I hope someone does some investigation into, because it is really strange. That's the first time I think that's happened, where a Prime Minister has basically been secretly taking over portfolios of other ministers. And now we have, the government of the day being complicit in keeping that freedom, keeping that information from the public. This is, the governments don't basically want anybody to have the public to have information about what they're doing. That's all governments lie. But there seems to be more and more of this happening in Australia, more and more corruption. And, these neoliberal governments, no matter which major party is in power, are, they're just appalling. They're becoming so much it's becoming so much like the US. It makes me very sad. There's a lot I could say about all the things that are wrong today, and sorry about the wind. All the things that are wrong today that make it, fairly depressing, and then you have this move to this idea of winning nuclear wars. So insane and unhinged, and I never thought I'd ever see the day when idiots in power would be talking like that. I thought there was some kind of a boundary that they wouldn't want to cross, but apparently, and I know that the US has already used nuclear weapons on countries when they didn't even need to, meaning Japan. They didn't even need to do that, but this is another level of absolute stupidity and sadism, and to be trying to do this at a time where we're looking imminent human extinction and imminent all other animals extinction in the face, and now they're wanting to blow us up before that. And I know I've talked about this before, but I feel like this is we need to zoom out sometimes and look at the bigger picture, and then think about really how we are just all humans on the planet, and the other animals that are sharing the planet with us, they're just innocent victims in all of this. This is their planet too. They don't belong to us. They are individuals in their own right who have a right to live free of our interference, free of our exploitation and killing. But unfortunately, they've had the misfortune of being on the planet with our particular species in the short time that it is going to be on this planet. It's going to be a blip on the radar of this planet, our existence. I'd say that in probably 100 years, at most, but probably 60 years, will be a dwindling species and possibly gone, and a lot of other species will be gone with us. And that's a blessing for the planet, that we will be hopefully gone. I'm sorry to say that. That's not meant to be misanthropist, but it's just, I think, a fact, going by our behavior in this time we've been on the planet, and also particularly in relation to how we treat the rest of the population on the planet, who has the right to be here just like we do. Anyway, it's getting very windy, so I'm going to play this excerpt by Mark Webber, and think, that is probably in the hearts of a number of people. I do not think that social media reflects the reality of the population on this planet. It may reflect some people's realities, how they feel, but I think social media has become a massive psyops, which is just there to manufacture consent for more war, for the capitalist wars, the imperialist wars. It's just a psyop now, and sadly, it's also intended to create so much division that we're all fighting with one another, all hating on one another, all persecuting minority groups. Meanwhile, the powers that be, the oligarchy, the billionaires, the capitalist class, are all laughing away at us all as we, the terrible metaphor, crabs in a barrel, that we're all sort of fighting with one another while they take over everything and concentrate power. And one other thing that I've heard and I haven't looked into this, and I might see if I can find out a bit about this. There is also a thing of the climate credit points, where people, if they're trying to bring in, some government somewhere is trying to bring in climate credit points, which means, and if it weren't for the fact that governments are into controlling and taking over people's lives, some of these ideas may not be such a bad thing, meaning some sort of reward system for maybe trying to end your consumption of animal products or something like that to assist in the climate crisis. That might have been not such a terrible thing. I don't know. I haven't really looked into it, but I mean, these sorts of things are actually used to control the public and concentrate power. And when they bring in the stable coin, where there's a cashless society, they're going to be able to just stop people's payments, stop people's ability to access their account if people are not doing what they want them to do, or if they're maybe funding, say, an independent journalist that is threatening people in power. They can just say, well, you've done this, so we're just going to stop your account or block give your donations to that, like they did with WikiLeaks many years ago through MasterCard, Visa, etc. But they'll be able to do it with the stablecoin because they'll be able to see everything that you're buying, have access to all that information, and then see who you're donating to. So there's all these sort of concentrations of power coming in through things like that digital currency. That's why crypto is actually, I think, an important asset. The various crypto assets are going to be important in this regard, because there's, the decentralized nature of some of them. But there's some pretty there's some pretty sad things coming, and but as I've said before, it's important to never give up. It's also important to live in the present, be in the present moment. There's nothing to fear in the present moment, as Eckhart Tolle has said. When we're living in the present, we're dealing with things as they're happening. It doesn't mean you don't take action on things, but you're experiencing reality because all we have is the present moment. Anyway, so thanks so much for watching. I'm going to play this clip by Mark Webber. Till next time, thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Hey guys, I don't really ever do this, but I don't know, I'm going to do it now. Just stepped out for some morning coffee, picking up some toilet paper, and I don't know, you guys. I'm feeling a bit worried for the world, for humanity. I don't really know where I'm going with this. Where am I going with this? I just feel the love, right? I gotta put it on my sweatshirt. I gotta remind myself and remind other people. Love yourself, right? And when you love yourself and remember to, it makes it easier to find the love for other people. And I guess I'm really feeling the effects of the divisiveness that's happening in the world at a seemingly non-stop rate when you tap into your devices. They seem to create more division than unity, it feels like. You know, people's opinions and people's opinions about their opinions and whose side are you on type shit just doesn't actually match up with my reality, though. That's the thing that's weird. Like, in my reality, I see a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I love everybody too. This is crazy. Like, the shit that's going on in the world doesn't really represent how I feel. I'm a complicated individual. I'm not just a white person or a black person or a gay person or a rich person or a poor person. I'm a fucking person. And we all suffer. And we all lie. And we all make mistakes. And I don't know, there's a lot of people out here pretending like they don't. Like that they're not human. And that worries me. Anyway, how do you guys feel, you know? Like, I opened up Twitter yesterday before getting on a plane, and it was talking about fucking Armageddon. You know, and I'm like, cool. I just live this whole life, go through all this shit to basically get vaporized with all my children in a nuclear attack. I didn't really fucking sign up for that, you know? But then on the other hand, what it did was a beautiful thing, which I sit with every day, where I'm like, man, I don't know. I could die right now. One of these cars could just veer off, hit me. You know, that's it. That's all she wrote, right? So, you know, sitting with death and the idea that we can die at any moment actually brings more presence and value to my life, because I'm cherishing every moment that I'm here. And it's a process, and it's not perfect. And there are dark days. Dark Mark is a very real thing. Moody Mark is a very real thing. But I have so much love in my heart. And that's it. I want to share that. I want to share that love with you. I love you. I love us. Let's keep fucking going.